Welcome everyone, I am Tock Custom, and on this video I'm going to show you how to digitize your own graphics into your own embroidery files so that you can make your own patches or embroider anything that you want onto any of your projects. So let's jump right into this. The software I'm going to be using is the PE Design 10 software by Brother, and it comes with this dongle that you have to have plugged into your computer for it to work, and it has its own memory card, which is meant for Brother embroidery machines, so you can transfer files to your machines easily. The first thing you'll see when you open it is this little welcome page, which asks you if you want to use one of your other designs or make something from scratch. So I always set my hoop size and fabric first. This is where you need to start. If you're using the Brother SE400 from my last video, you'll have to set the hoop size to 4x4, but I'm going to be using my bigger machine, which has a 5x7 inch hoop. And if you want to rotate your design so it's either vertical or horizontal, you would do that here. When I hit OK, it's going to ask me what kind of fabric I want to use. Most of my stuff I do on denim because it makes great patches, and when I make messenger bags, I use denim a lot. And it will also tell you the recommended stabilizers for this, which is extremely helpful. So make sure you select the correct fabric and you read the instructions on which stabilizer you need next. So for this video, I thought it would be fun to do an embroidery of the Stark sigil from Game of Thrones, because I thought it was a really cool graphic and I love Game of Thrones. So what I want to do is go to Image, and there are 4 different automated types of embroidery in the software. I'm going to do Auto Punch because it's the cleanest looking. So when I select that and I open my graphic, the first thing it's going to ask me to do is select my mask. Now, I always do the full rectangle graphic around it, but if you want it to be in the shape of a heart or a circle, you could select one of these pre-made ones. But I'm just going to hit next to go to the next thing, and now it wants me to select my size. And I always do fit to page first, and I'll resize this later. So I do that, then I'm going to hit next. Now this is the part where we start laying out how many colors we want in our graphic and some other things like that. So this graphic only has 3 colors. It's black, white, and gray. So I'm going to set the max colors to 3, and I'm going to hit retry, and it's going to reselect the colors. And then I'm going to set noise reduction to 0 so that I get all of the pixels in my graphic. And the segment sensitivity, I want to set this to high for this so that I get a very true embroidery of this graphic. So when I hit retry, it's going to remap everything, and that looks pretty good. So the background, by default, it will always make clear, which is what I want. So when I click the background, it's going to see this little checkerboard pattern. That's how I know there's nothing there. And then I can zoom in to make sure that it's got all of the white areas of the teeth are white, and the eye is white, so that all looks really good. So when I'm happy, I'll hit finish, and it will lay this out as a real embroidery graphic. Now, this embroidery looks pretty good, but there's a few things that I don't like and that I want to edit. So I'm going to show you how I edit my embroidery graphics. The first thing I want to do is I want to ungroup this so that I can modify the different parts of the design. So I'm going to select it, right-click, and hit ungroup. And now all of these little pieces here are going to be independent from each other, which is what I want. So when I zoom into the lower part of my design, I can tell there's a couple of things going on here that I don't like. And the first thing I need to do is talk about stitch types. Now there's a fill stitch where it's going to do the same distance between each stitch to make a certain type of texture, which I like a lot for these gray parts. And then there's a satin stitch, which is what all of the black lines are made up, where it will jump from one side completely over to the other and do a completely different texture. So I can tell that these parts here are a satin stitch based on that texture, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is select all of these, and I'm going to hold Control, and that's going to let me select all those different parts. And I'm going to change these. On the top, I go to Shapes, and then I switch Satin Stitch to Fill Stitch. Now I can tell that these stitches in those areas are not going the same direction as the rest of my gray stitches. So we need to talk about stitch directions. So I'm going to go to Sewing Attributes here. Now it's set to auto. So if I hit play, I can tell that these stitches are kind of going a different automated direction where it's kind of going to fill it in based on the shape of each thing, which I don't want that. I want them to all be the same diagonal direction. So what I'm going to do is change this from auto to manual, and then it's got a 135-degree angle. So now they're all going the same direction as the rest of my gray stitching here, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to go through all of the parts that I can tell are a satin stitch, and I'm going to change all of these to a fill stitch. So I'm just holding Control and selecting everything there. Then I go to Shapes, switch from satin to fill stitch. And now I'm going to go to the sewing attributes and set to a manual direction. So now all my stitches are going the same direction and they're all a fill stitch. Now I want to go through and make sure that all of the black parts are a satin stitch. So I can see this little wrinkle here and this piece are fill stitches. So I'm going to switch these from fill to satin stitch. Then I'm going to set those to auto as well so that they kind of blend in and look like the rest of the black stitches. So for the sake of this design, this looks pretty good, and if I want to see exactly how my machine is going to embroider this, I can just hit play on the bottom right here, and I can max the speed so I can see that is exactly how my machine is going to do this in that order of colors. If you look at the bottom of my screen, you can see it goes from, sorry I'm blocking it, it goes from white stitch to gray stitch to black stitch at the end. That's how you know the color order. And now I can go to Save As, and I can save this as Stark, and I'm going to save this as a PES file. Brother embroidery machines read PES files for embroideries. So I saved that, and if you need to save this for a different type of embroidery machine, I would export it. So this is going to let me export it to a Singer or a FAF or a different embroidery machine type. So Brother is PES. If you have a different type, you can look up what file type you need. Now I'm going to go and actually embroider this real quick, and we're going to come back and see how this turns out. Alright, so I just finished doing my embroidery, and it turned out perfect. Now, when my machine asked for the gray, I used a lighter silver, but I can't really get a close-up on here, but that is exactly how it turned out, and I think it looks really good. So I could add some fusible webbing to the back so I can iron it on, or I could just sew it directly to a project. But it was that easy. Alright, so say I wanted to do an embroidery of a picture of a person. So I can go to Photo Stitch here, and I'm going to load up a picture of a friend of mine. Now, when I load this picture up, it does the same thing, asks me to do the correct mask, and I can hit next and do fit to page, just like before. But with Photo Stitch, this is going to look a lot different. So the first thing I want to do is, where it says page color, I do not want to sew the page color, so it's going to blend out the background. And then I can set fine stitch and do a shorter run time so that the stitches will be a little bit more detailed. I can change the brightness and contrast. But this is basically just a picture of a friend of mine wearing a cowboy hat. So once I got everything laid out, I can update my preview, and it's going to look a little bit cleaner. If I want to do more colors so this looks a little bit more realistic, I could add that and then update the preview there. So once this looks good, I can hit finish, and it's going to end up looking like that. Now, I know that looks pretty messy, but when you actually do it, they turn out pretty well. And when I hit play, it will show me exactly how it is going to lay this out to create a picture of a man wearing a cowboy hat. So that's one other thing that you can do with the software to digitize some photographs or other things like that. Okay, so I set up a new project, and say we want to make a patch of just some text or something like that. I could make a shape here of kind of a rounded rectangle, and let's say I want the background of this to be a fill stitch, and I can choose a different color on the right here and do red. And then the outline, let's say I want it to be a zigzag stitch that is gold. So that looks like that. And let's say we wanted to put some text in here. I can go to text, do that, drop some text in the middle, and I could just say, sewing is cool, or something like that. Now, the text is red, so it's hard to see it. So I want to change that to, let's say blue. And then I can kind of change the shape and make this a little bit taller. And that's pretty much it for that. So this would fill a big red area in with red and do an outline and then embroider that on top, which could be really cool. And then there's some other freeform things that we can do where let's start a new project. All right, so let's say we want to make our own custom patch from scratch that was completely original. I could go to make a custom shape here, and then I'm going to select the background so it's black and the border so it's red, and I could kind of make kind of an asymmetrical shape like that, and it's going to give me that background. If I want to draw some of my own lines, I could do the freeform line, and this is going to do, let's say, like a purple line. And I could just draw a bunch of squigglies in here, and it will just digitize whatever I do. So this actually works kind of like Microsoft Paint, but everything you draw, it is going to map out for you to be able to digitize this on a machine, which is really cool to be able to just basically freehand draw anything you want from scratch. Something else we could talk about is the stitch order. So the first thing is on top left here. You can see it's going to do the black box first, and then it's going to do the red outline, and then it's going to do the purple squiggly line. This also shows at the bottom, and this is for the sake of the animation, when I hit play, where this little moving bar that's coming up moves over. That is another way you can see the stitch color order. If you want to change this so that, say, the red was first, I could select the red and then go to stitch order and have it so first, and it's going to do that first, and then you're going to have kind of a slight border around it. Alright, so I just pulled up a graphic of a design I made a while ago of my own logo, and I was just going to change a couple of things so that the purple was a little lighter, and it does a fill stitch instead of a satin stitch. Okay, so we've got that. Now, I can tell with this that I've got kind of a grainy, like fuzzy outline, and it won't look too bad if I do that, but I want that to be a little bit more dense stitching. So let's talk about that a little bit. So when I go to the sewing attributes, when I select this whole thing, I go to sewing attributes, and then there's a thing that says density here. Now if I increase this, the more I increase it, the more stitches it's going to put into it, but the more dense that design is going to look. So it's going to take a little bit longer when we do it, but when I zoom in, I can tell it's a lot cleaner on the edges. And you have to be kind of careful not to go too dense because you don't want to jam your machine, but the more dense this goes, the more polished this is going to look. Alright, so let's say we wanted to take the white parts of this embroidery and do something really different with it. I'm going to select all of my white stitch types by selecting all the white areas on the left. And let's say we didn't want this to be a fill stitch. Let's say we want to do a programmable fill stitch. So this is going to let me select different textures that the embroidery machine will actually embroider into this, which looks really cool when you do that. And if I go to the programmable fill thing over here, I can select it and do all these crazy different little textures, and they look really cool when they come out. So when I back up from that, I can tell there's this really unique texture pattern on the background, which is a really fun way to add some extra kind of unique elements to your designs without getting too crazy with changing colors and stuff like that. One other thing that this software does that the original version doesn't is you can do an embroidered patch wizard, which is really cool, where I can just click embroidered patch at the top here, and it will do a satin stitch around anything that I want, along with a cut line. So it'll actually sew in a line that tells you exactly where to cut it, so that if I want to make this a custom patch with its own border, I could just do it automatically like that, which is really helpful. When you're done with your embroidery design, you can either save it for later use, or if you've got your memory card plugged into your USB dongle, you can click at the top it says send, and then you click write to card. And when you hit OK, it's going to delete the previous file and rewrite the new one onto your memory card. So that pretty much covers most of the main features that I use this software for. It does do a lot more stuff, but for the sake of this tutorial, this is just kind of a beginner's level thing. So have some fun playing around with it, and if you learn something new, feel free to share it with me. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and please keep letting me know what videos you guys want to see in the future. But thank you so much for watching this, and hopefully you guys end up creating some of your own cool embroideries and patches soon. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.